diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis. Because,
So
there was no,
you were the blood bank. I was the blood bank.
biopsy
Yeah.
done or anything.
So then
They
it
just
gets
saw
still
something on the
I don't
scan.
know. Yeah.
Jumped to the conclusion.
I rolled Linda down.
And then we had
Thinking
blood work
maybe
done
blow it
a
out
couple
or
months ago.
suck it out or something. Get rid of it.
A lot of those
I might wear my
levels
jacket.
haven't really increased. So, what's
Yeah.
going on? Yeah, we don't know. Have you talked to his doctor? I did, when they did the blood work, he was surprised that the levels were where they were. So now what do we do?
Well, he has that upbeat kind of spirit that he keeps himself going. And I think that's supposed to help with your physical health.
You would think his white blood cells would be high and, all those liver, indices would be.
It's a wonder they hadn't reevaluated this.
Yeah, they're worried, well, if he goes to see a doctor, then they're gonna take him off positive, that's what they're really worried about, I don't know if that's true or not.
The banking.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
I do know that I had known people in the past that went on Jesus and went off when they had a prison.
And we finally,
I know that
they made the appointment, we
Yeah.
went up, it wasn't ready,
Not
I
that
had to go
we
back
were
twice on Thursday. And today,
We were
the
told
bank
5 months ago,
finally got straight.
advanced, fast growing cancer.
So, I'm going to tap your shoulder, do you know Photoshop?
And
Yeah.
I'm still good.
Yeah.
Good.
It's a new program.
Except for the time where the medicine may use,
And
it hallucinates,
medicine can be it.
oh, yeah,
And
he's
thank
seeing
you for
things.
coming first. I think getting the ride in the car.
That was legit.
That was almost-
Yeah. Please tell him.
I will.
I should have said that a long time ago. I should have said that yesterday.
Everybody's praying for him.
Ready?
I appreciate it.
You don't have that?
Yeah.
Anything?
How's your mom doing? This is a lot.
Oh, we should.
Yeah, I'm all right.
Because I'm good
So
today.
that she,
We'll share it.
she kept saying it's
a walk.
Where did she sleep?
It's been in, the main bedroom. In the bed. Oh, yeah. And so the girls, the people that come at night, they're in there in the den, sitting there in the dark, while they're in the bedroom.
They're not calling you.
They're gonna do what they wanna do.
It's usually, this days is more like everything else or something.
They're making easy
So
money.
anyway, they're having a weekend and then I think yep.
There's no way there's no way, none of them should be on the stairs.
Yeah.
We were wondering the same thing. Remember they moved to the big house, that foundation issues, and they go find a house with 3,000 square feet.
Yeah, that was.
It is a nice area.
Yeah. Small yard. I'm the one that cut the.
Oh.
Oh, it's big. Less than 30 minutes. The longest part is we need, yeah, but it's not straight line, it's all these curves and
And then.
everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Little spot, sunspot.
No, it's bruised.
Oh, really? Yeah.
For my kids, it's working here.
I'm not good at that, sir. Okay. 65. Almost 66. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
No. I wanna be third.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that.
Cause that way, I can go back and
Working on the.
read it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. I know.
You know, now we're pleasure, but there's been the things that we're proud of.
He's got it down there now.
That's all. They have TV every day.
Starts to.
So they have research.
Oh, they changed the board, but he didn't change the board.
What is your age?
Yeah. It's not the end of the world.
I can take you. We're just short people. Soccer right now.
We got another knee behind it.
Yeah, Scott said he's gonna take over.
Are you?
I know that one, what's that look? Scott will take over.
He's listed on the board.
Yeah, but a lot of them don't really do that.
That's what we hear anyway.
Blake said he would do it too. You wrote that? He'll do it. Come to vote, please. Well,
Okay, yeah. Oh.
Right, it's not like.
Well, we might have to do an adjustment. That's why I'm saying.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Glad you made it to Wednesday at 7:03. You didn't think you'd make it this far, but you did, you made it. So that's great.
We've been late till October.
Is that right? Yeah, I guess so, huh? I don't know. I just told somebody in the hallway good morning, so how often can you?
Somewhere it's morning.
Somewhere, yeah.
All what I say,
Yeah.
cause it is, when I used to work, I was working a morning shift.
Oh, yeah.
You get to work at 3 a.m.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's no good. You get all out of sorts that way. We're gonna start in chapter 24 of Isaiah tonight, and, maybe some parts of this will be a little easier than some of what we've seen. We're kind of winding down God's judgment of the nations. And this section, in some ways, is a summary. I think is a fair way to describe it. I think that's even how that might be how it's described in the workbook. If you're using the book, we're on page 59. Do y'all use the book? Read through the book? It's got I've said it a couple times. I mean, it's got a good little summary of things that helps you at least get the general idea. Of course, as with any text, you can get as in depth as you want to go, but the book does give a fair explanation, I think, and give you the idea of it. And maybe you've picked up on some patterns. You know, a text like this, you should eventually start to see some patterns emerge. And I know with prophecy, it can be confusing, especially in some of the things we've seen where it's just, you don't know what time frame you're dealing with. You're dealing one verse, you're dealing with some political situation, and the next verse you're dealing with something that sounds like it's going to happen out in the future. You're not sure when, and then it goes back to the present political context, and you can kind of just get lost in all of that. But here in this section is sort of a wrap up of what we have seen. So what is apparent is that God's judgment is not going to be good for anybody. And Isaiah has warned Philistia, has warned Judah, hey, don't celebrate when you see your enemies falling, because you're next. So it's not good for anyone. And we get a sense of really who's to blame here as we get into chapter 24. But in verse 1 it says, "Behold, the Lord will make empty the earth and make it desolate. He will twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. And it shall be, as with the people, so with the priest, as with the slave, so with the master, as with the maid, so with their mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the debtor. The earth shall be utterly emptied and plundered, for the Lord has spoken this word." So that's quite a way to explain things, isn't it? He's going to empty the earth, twist its surface, and scatter its inhabitants. That's just, whatever that involves, it can't be good. And you definitely get the impression that no one's getting away. Nobody's going to be able to escape that. And then the way the contrasts are used in verse 2, the slave and his master, the maid and the mistress, buyer and seller. So you've got both ends of the spectrum, regardless of where you are in life, socially or otherwise, you're going to be affected by this. No one is going to be excluded or spared. And he's saying this in reference to the entire earth. This judgment is going to be full and complete. So in verse 4 it says, "The earth mourns and withers. The world languishes and withers. The highest people of the earth languish. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants. For they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men are left." So, who's to be blamed? People. Okay, the people. And that's what Isaiah brings out here. You could imagine when all of this starts to happen and the nations start to fall like dominoes, there's a lot of questioning that's going to happen. When you get to Israel and Judah especially, because, hey, we were God's chosen people. Thought we were safe, thought we were going to be spared all of this. But God is going He's going to be just. And why is He going to punish them? Why is He going to punish His people? What does He say?
Transgressed all of His laws.
Transgressed all of His laws?
Broke the covenant.
Okay, yes, they've broken the covenant, and that's key. That points back to the fact that God is dealing with them according to the covenant. So if you go back and you read, for example, Deuteronomy 30 to 32, in those chapters, it warns the people about the blessings of the covenant and the curses of it. That if you follow it, you'll be blessed, and if you break it, you'll be cursed. So there's blessing and there's punishment. It's all spelled out in black and white, maybe is how we would say it. But this is not, what God is doing is not an afterthought. It's not just a reactionary sort of thing. It is all in keeping with the covenant. So you might, justice is always done according to something. There's some standard. There's some basis for it. And God is interacting with them on the basis of this covenant that He makes all the way back with Abraham. It is restated several times, of course, you think, with what He does with Moses, and later on what He does with David. But it's very clear, and that's why this is happening. They have an explanation for it. So they're to be blamed, and I think that's a really important point for us to keep in mind, because we live in a different time, but God interacts with us in a very similar way. He's told us, here are the blessings of keeping my covenant, and here are the curses of breaking my covenant. It's a new covenant, a covenant that is written on the heart by the Spirit. You can go to Jeremiah where he talks about that, prophesies about it. But God has always dealt with man in that kind of fashion. And so when there's punishment, the blame is placed upon the one who's broken his covenant. So he holds us responsible, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. And I think that's an important lesson that we can learn consistently throughout the Old Testament. Is that only the people are to be blamed, not God. It's not as if God is not being fair or just. Had God overlooked the sin of his people, then you could make the argument that God was not just, that God was partial, biased. And that's not the case. And that gets restated when Paul lays out things in Romans, that both the nations and Israel were to be blamed. And they did not have a case to make for themselves. They had no standing because they broke the covenant, broken God's law.
This term, everlasting covenant, seems to be mostly applied to the covenant with Abraham, of which the Mosaic covenant was sort of an outgrowth or an amplification. But that term, everlasting, in Genesis several times it mentions the Abrahamic covenant as everlasting covenant.
Yeah. And I guess that's
So
where we
even
first,
the most ancient of covenants they've broken.
yeah, that's where it stems from God's dealing with him. Verse 7, it says, the vine mourns, the vine languishes, all the merry-hearted sigh. The mirth of the tambourines is stilled, the noise of the jubilant has ceased, the mirth of the lyre is stilled. No more do they drink wine with singing, strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The wasted city is broken down, every house is shut up so that no one can enter. There is an outcry in the streets for lack of wine, all joy has grown dark. The gladness of the earth is vanished. Desolation is left in the city, the gates are battered into ruins. For thus it shall be in the midst of the earth among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as it is gleaned when the grape harvest is done. How would you describe that?
Nothing's going to be growing. It's going to be desolation.
Okay?
No more fun times.
No more fun times. No more fun times. The party's over. The way I worded it. The party's over.
The mental picture almost is like the pictures you see from Gaza now, where there were houses and dwellings, now they're all broken down. There's no security, there's no safety there. It's that sort of dire circumstance in this picture.
Yeah. So the party's over. The party's over. Why do people like the party?
Happy.
Happy?
Eat,
That's what they do. Yeah.
eat more.
Eat more? It's a metaphor, isn't it? We say that, right? With some people, life's a party. And I think that's true of the people we're reading about here.
I think this is poetic. I think.
Yeah. So it's poetic. So we use the same kind of metaphor. Life's a party. We work for the weekend. Sunday fun day. That kind of mentality. Life's a party. Why is that some people's approach to life?
I've known somebody like that, and it did not end well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To satisfy yourself, basically.
Satisfy yourself.
Well, they're focused on the physical and not the spiritual. When he talks about the merry-hearted sigh, he's talking about those that just focus on themselves happy.
Yeah. But I mean, isn't that what life's about?
No.
I mean, that's what we tend to think that life is about that. I mean, how many times have you said it about your kids? You know, you just want your kids to be happy, and we don't realize the words coming out of our mouths when we say things like that. So that mentality can begin rather subtly, early on. Part of the justification for it, I think, for some, is that, well, you work hard and you play hard. Work hard, play hard. Sometimes people think that that's really all that life's about, right? Is trying to have a good time. Get whatever you can get out of it. Life's short. So
I only have one life and I can live it the way I want.
Yeah. But that's not the only reason, right? That's not the only reason people live like that.
Avoidance of the serious.
Yes, avoidance. We want to distract ourselves from, well, things that are not so fun, are not so happy, and
The heavy stuff.
the heavy stuff, and let's just keep the party going, because that's good, a welcome distraction. The problem with that, of course, is that eventually, the party's over. Even before the party's over, I've said before, the music is too loud, the food's really not that great, and the company gets old. So it's not satisfying. And so when I read this, I thought there's something about what's described here that is common to how we react and respond to life in this world and the darker sides of life. And these people, he's telling them, eventually you're going to have to come to terms with reality. You can't run from the fact that you're accountable to God. And that's what's happening here. And of course, it's a sobering reality that's the direction that we're all headed. God's holding all of us accountable, and no matter what we try to do to distract ourselves from that or to avoid that. So it's quite a description here, I think, that we can really relate to in terms of what we see in our world. Anything else about the party being over?
Well, we can, if our focus is on God and serving God and the blessings He gives us, we don't have to go into that, oh no, everything's bad, because not everything is bad.
Yeah, because God provides us with the means to find contentment, joy, and meaning in life, and He provides us with blessings to cope with the darker sides of life, right? I mean, that's what the resurrection of Christ is all about. That's where it all funnels to that. We serve a God who raises the dead, and that has profound implications about how we live our lives and the outlook we're to have when confronted with decay and transience. You think about in Hebrews 11 talking about how Abraham wanted permanence. He wanted permanence. Nothing in this world is permanent. It's constantly changing and moving and breaking down, and things being taken from us, and he wants permanence. So that's provided for us, and we can we can have an abundant life through what Christ offers. That goes to what He says there in John 10 as the Good Shepherd, so He can feed and protect. In verses 14 to 16, we go back now to some cautious optimism Isaiah seems to be cautiously optimistic about a rejoicing remnant. I mean, on the one hand, we just read that, well, there's really no reason to be happy. Party's over. But then he says, they lift up their voices. They sing for joy over the majesty of the Lord. They shout from the west. Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord. In the coastlands of the sea, give glory to the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. From the ends of the earth, we hear songs of praise, of glory to the righteous one. But I say, waste away. I waste away. Woe is me, for the traitors have betrayed with betrayal. The traitors have betrayed. So I think 14 to half to 16 is hopeful and positive. But then he says, woe is me. So it's yes, there's hope in the future, but God's judgment's coming first. And so it's sort of, you take that for what it is. And Isaiah is, I suppose, well, even for us, it's hard sometimes to see the big picture. He's talking about big picture things, but there's also things in the near term that they're going to have to go through and endure. So it is hopeful, but it does not take away the fact they're going to be punished. Then the rest of the chapter deals with this idea of the Lord being supreme, and that fits the context of He's judging the whole earth. We've seen where pronouncements have been made against kings of the earth, the ones who are the most powerful in the earth. But they, when compared to God, they have no power. Ultimately, the Lord is going to reign supreme, and His plans are going to move forward despite what anyone may have to say or do in response to it. Chapters 25 and 26 have some really interesting lines. It begins by talking about how the Lord victoriously reigns over the earth. It's a continuation of that thought from the previous chapter. He says, O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things, plans formed of old, faithful and sure. For you have made the city a heap, the fortified city a ruin. The foreigner's palace is a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. Therefore, strong peoples will glorify you. Cities of ruthless nations will fear you. You have been a stronghold to the poor, a stronghold to the needy in distress, a shelter from the storm and a shade from the heat. For the breath of the ruthless is like the breath of the ruthless is like a storm against a wall, like a heat in a dry place. You subdue the noise of the foreigners as heat by the shade of a cloud. So the song of the ruthless is put down. So he's praising God for his victory. In verses 7 and 8, he seems to be talking about being victorious over not the kings of the earth, but against a victory over death. It says in verse 7, He will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. And the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. And the reproach of His people He will take away from the earth, for the Lord has spoken it. Reading these chapters, it raises some questions. What does that sound like to you?
Like the end of time as far as we know it.
Okay, maybe the end of time. What did you?
Christ coming.
Okay.
Doing away with death.
Okay, Christ coming, doing away with death. Anything else come to mind when you hear that? We read this with an understanding of the Messiah, a much fuller understanding of the Messiah than they ever did. It's an interesting thing when you an interesting study when you start looking at, what was, we'll put it this way, what's the Old Testament's teaching concerning resurrection. These chapters in particular, and there's some others that are more detailed than these, but these chapters begin to say something about resurrection.
It hints at it.
It hints
That's
at
about
it.
all it does.
Yeah, it hints at it. And, some would say that, what does the Old Testament say about resurrection as we understand it in terms of Messiah? They'd say, well, nothing. Because nobody ever would have read any of this and thought about resurrection the way we think about it. And you can see ideas starting to take shape and forming over this from this point until Christ. It may be a good example of what the Jews thought about a resurrection was the conversation Jesus has with Martha about Lazarus, her brother. Do you remember what she said?
She knew he would be resurrected at the final day.
Okay, yeah. As far as she thought, and this is a common thought, is resurrection is something that's going to happen at the end of time. The end of time. Now again, you keep peeling back layers of the onion, and you see, well, some of the Jews, they didn't think there was any kind of bodily resurrection, right? What group do we associate that with? Sadducees. Okay. While others are inclined to that. Some think that resurrection is about not a person per se, but New kingdom, yeah, a nation. So I just put that out there to say that it's all of this is going to be taken very differently than how we would read it. I mean, you think, you see something about, death is swallowed up. Well, Paul, when he explains the resurrection, the earliest text concerning the resurrection you have in the New Testament, 1 Corinthians 15, he deals with that idea. So it's certainly not as clear when Isaiah is putting this down than that it might be with us. And even with us, it's not as clear as we think.
Even then, you got verse 9 of that thing, and you can read it because I can't read it.
Yeah, verse 9, which is good, because I have it up here on the in my PowerPoint. It says, "And on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the Lord. We've waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation."
Amen.
So, those who faithfully waited on the Lord are the ones who are saved here. And that's a great idea. And this is I think the first time, it won't be the last time that Isaiah uses the idea of waiting on the Lord in his writing. So what does waiting mean? We see the idea of waiting in the New Testament. What does waiting mean?
It doesn't mean being idle.
Okay.
It means active waiting.
Okay.
That we are depending on God and waiting for him to act, but in the meantime, we're acting, doing the things that he's left for us to do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an active thing. What else is involved in waiting? Patience. Yeah. Patience. Patience corresponds to the idea of endurance and in hope. All of these ideas work together. Paul kind of gives us some thought flow in Romans 5, where he uses this kind of language about the purpose of enduring suffering, and it will lead to the formation of character and a greater and deeper understanding of hope. And he says, if you trust the process, you won't be disappointed with the end result. So, yeah, waiting is not an idle thing. It's an active thing. You think of like the Christians at Thessalonica. They thought waiting was, let's just quit our jobs and sit here and see what happens. And he says, no, waiting means living.
Yeah.
You've got to live. It involves faith, living in a certain kind of way. But it is an active thing. And so it's a great text, that when salvation comes, well, those who have been found waiting. And you find that in the parable of the 10 virgins, right? They're waiting. They were prepared, which gets into the idea of being actively involved in the process.
One of the problems with waiting is that we don't know what the Lord's timetable is. It's easier to wait if you know you have a set time.
Yeah.
But when it's open-ended, it makes it really hard.
Yeah. Very, very hard. Anything else?
Reading through the Old Testament, as you know, about Jesus coming, makes a lot of things make sense in that forward story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They didn't have that.
So without him, without the rest of it, it's, well, something good is going to happen, but we don't.
They were wondering about a lot of things.
Yeah, wondering about a lot of things, and they were going to have time to wrestle with it, and so you can see how certain ideas about resurrection, for example, develop over time and generations. Resurrection happening at the end of time. I'll say this and we'll move on. Resurrection happening at the end of time with Martha. No one thought that resurrection was going to happen right in the middle of history, and that's when it occurred. That was not there. There was not anybody who thought that the future was going to come to the present, and that's that's a bit mind bending, but that's what happens with the resurrection of Jesus. And then there's other components of it as well that were unanticipated, but Martha thinks it's way out here in the future, and she would live to see it happen. Anyhow, 26. We're not done with resurrection. There's more here in 26, but here's another song. We've got the greatest hits of Isaiah, and we've seen the blues collection, some dark and depressing stuff earlier, and here's a happy song. Verse 1, it says, we have a strong city. He set up salvation as walls and bulwarks. Open the gates that the righteous nation that keeps faith may enter in. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock, where he has humbled the inhabitants of the height, the lofty city. He lays it low to the ground, casts it to the dust. The foot tramples it to feed the poor, the steps of the needy. So again, this is the aftermath. We've said there's a great victory that has taken place, and so where all of this ultimately is heading, which we'll get to when we start into chapter 40 to the rest of this. Now, this is about the Messiah coming and bringing in God's new world, and which is something entirely different from what we know and experience. And so, as all of that happens, you would expect a chapter like we have here in chapter 26, this song of praise to what's happened. It mentions the idea of peace. Well, Messiah was described as the Prince of Peace, and his rule was described as peaceful in chapter 9. And we're going to continue to see that concept of peace shows up several times in Isaiah. It's rather common in terms of all of the other descriptions that are given of it. Peace is one of the primary ones. I thought that what he says in verse 2 is important. The righteous nation that keeps faith may enter in. So, we saw early on in the second chapter where all all of the nations are going to come to be part of this new kingdom. And so, how's that going to happen? How are the nations going to be incorporated into one kingdom? That's a reasonable question. Well, the answer is given here in verse 2. That it's faith. It's through faith that they're going to be brought in. And this is consistent. This is consistent with what we understand how humans are to have a relationship with the Creator. You know, we could look at it from the perspective of, well, we're saved by grace through faith. And certainly what is described here, this new kingdom is about grace. We've already seen where the remnant, Paul will later describe the remnant, is a remnant of grace. It's not about your nationality. It's not about the family into which you were born. You know, the Jews thought we're Abraham's descendants. And Paul says, no, that's not what is important. This remnant is a remnant of grace, and grace is always accessed through faith, determined by faith. It's not determined by your ancestry. And so this is another example where that idea is right there for us to see. So if you and I want to be part of the kingdom, then we have to keep faith to be brought into it. Anything about keeping faith? Righteousness. I mean, Paul says that the righteousness of God is received by faith.
Reminds me a little bit of what Habakkuk said.
Go ahead.
The righteous will live by faith.
Uh-huh.
Kind of facing a similar situation. The doom is coming.
Yeah.
Wondering, what's going on with this, and the answer is the righteous are going to live by faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been the problem with the Israelites the whole time. Is that when they lose their faith in God, that's when they start turning to everything else. The problems start. When the faith is restored, in God, then you let God take care of things, and that's when things get better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way he says it's going to be, whenever this new plan comes in, whatever that is, they don't. But these are the people that are going to be there, the ones that have faith in me. This is encouraging. If you are that person that has faith in God, you should be encouraged by this.
Mm-hmm.
That eventually there's going to be a place where people are like you,
Mm-hmm.
and that we all believe in God and have faith in Him. He's going to take care of us.
Yeah. That's good, Habakkuk. And that's what Paul quotes in Romans 1. The world's coming undone, and the world's wicked and evil. Why aren't you doing anything about it? It's Habakkuk's complaint. And the answer is the just live by faith. And God will, He will set the world aright. And that's what Isaiah is showing us. Here's how God is setting the world right. Now, ultimately, He's going to do it through the Prince of Peace, through the branch.
I think I highlight everybody's free will. Not to be forced to do anything. You let everybody else to obey God or not. God's not going to force you one way or the other.
Yeah.
He already made His pitch, if you will, and if you come on my side or not, it's up to you. I'm going to force you to do it.
Yeah. Here's what's going to happen, and now you can respond accordingly. Yep. Very good. All right. Well, he continues to go on about dealing with resurrection and death, and who's going to rise and who's not going to rise. There's some interesting things that I wanted to point out here. In verses 13 and 14, it says, O Lord, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone will bring to remembrance. They are dead. They will not live. They are shades. They will not rise. And to that end, you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. But you have increased the nation, O Lord. You have increased the nation. You are glorified. You have glorified all the borders of the land. So he's in the middle of this. here are some people who are not going to be part of what's happening here. There are some who are dead and who will not rise. He says the shades will not rise. And, that brings up a whole big idea. Do you know the word for shades? Do you know what the word for shades is? They're looking it up.
My version says departed spirits.
Oh, departed spirits, yeah. What about that?
See those shadowy figures that we see.
Yeah. The shades. Shades. Who are the shades? Who are the shades?
What verse do you have on shades?
That's verse 14. Is that right? 14, yeah.
They are dead there, they will not live there to see.
Yeah.
Memory?
You'd think we'd have some continuity in a text like this. The shades is a reference to the Rephaim. The Rephaim. The Rephaim. Do you remember the Rephaim? You probably don't. You probably haven't learned much about the Rephaim. You know about the Anakim? Anakim? What's that?
Was it the sons of God?
Yeah. This goes back to Genesis 6, the sons of God coming down and taking daughters of men and having children, giving birth to Nephilim and the giants. That's what this is in reference to. And this is not a good time to just, trek off into here, but it's a significant passage. And it maybe the different ways our translations have worded this shows to how people have treated that, the very notion of it makes us very uncomfortable. The Rephaim are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, the descendants of the Anakim. You read Deuteronomy 2 and 3. You get some references to them, and they're not going to rise. Some would say this may be some explanation about what happened when the disembodied spirits who were chained in gloomy darkness that Jude and Peter reference. And their references, Jude and Peter's references, they're referencing the book of Enoch when they mention that. And if you want a fuller explanation about that, you can read the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch is not canonical, but it was written during the Second Temple period, and all of the Jews were familiar with this kind of stuff. And Peter and Jude make the point about how God can deal with the ungodly. So anyhow, go ahead.
I hate to ask you this, but I've never heard this. Could you kind of run through that briefly again, like the names, so I can look them up?
The Rephaim,
How do you spell that?
R-E-P-H, A-I-M, Deuteronomy 3, or Deuteronomy 2, I think in verses 16 to 22 reference them.
Okay.
And then Deuteronomy 3 talks about Og, who was one of them, king of Bashan, and the region of Bashan is significant. In the region of Bashan is Mount Hermon, and Mount Hermon is believed to be the mountain where the sons of God came down.
Okay. And then how does this relate back to the
Giants.
Yeah, the giants. The Rephaim are the departed spirits
From the Nephilim. The Nephilim are not, they are not humans.
Alright.
They're a hybrid. So we need to have a whole course on the unseen realm.
Yeah.
Because it would change entirely the way you see. A lot of this stuff is in the background and is known and understood by these ancient people, and it's been obscured over time.
When you say Deuteronomy
2 and 3.
2
person that you back to lunch.
On that note. Yeah. I was told once that when you're reading a verse, if it's weird, it's probably important. That's a good rule.
Yeah.
I know that feeling. How are you?
That's a good read.
It's a very interesting, some of that,
Yeah.
especially intertestamental.
Yeah.
Because the New Testament, New Testament writers definitely knew about it, and referenced it a few times,
Yeah.
which kind of makes you wonder, like,
You went to there?
Yeah. I don't know what this means.
My dad did too.
That's, we don't use it, so like, I remember we had this those texts
Were 19, my mother.
okay.
Yeah.
Because-
No.
They all read that stuff.
And now,
Idiot.
it's funny that
You went
they
there.
call it, the church fathers, they named those writings. The false writings. If you wanted to discourage people from reading the books, what would you call them? The false writings, you know? So, anyhow.
I think I still have my copy of it, if you remember it too.
Oh, Heiser? Yeah, Heiser's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Heiser's awesome.